It looks like we might be ready to roll. We want to be respectful of everybody's time and what we're doing today. So welcome. My name is Lori Reinhardt, and I'm the co-director of West Seattle Indivisible. Thank you. I think we rock also. And I'm here as the MC for the whole day, as well as the moderator for this particular panel. A Way Home, Community Response to Housing and Homelessness. So if that's what you're looking for, you're in the right spot. The housing crisis has been an issue of great concern for most residents of Greater Seattle area for some time. And it's a complex issue, and the solutions are equally as complex. Today we have a distinguished panel of experts in our area who've been working long and hard on helping to resolve these issues. They represent Seattle and King County Coalition on Homelessness, North Helpline, and House Our Neighbors. This discussion will focus on advocacy for homes and shelter within the coalition, homelessness prevention through North Helpline, and an important part of the housing affordability crisis, social housing, and that's championed by House Our Neighbors. House Our Neighbors. Especially crucial right now is the work of the Washington State Legislature that's going to be making a lot of decisions about badly needed funding with limited resources. Our guests will discuss with you the state of the housing crisis, what their organization is working on, what they need to accomplish their work, and how all of us in the activist community, right, can support their work. Each of our panelists will have a presentation about 10 minutes in length using a PowerPoint, and then we'll have time for audience questions. And if you haven't yet done so, cards are available for you to write your questions on. And the ushers, we have some incredible people from West Seattle Indivisible here to make sure that you have cards and a pen. So if you don't have one, raise your hand and they'll get to you right away. When you do have a question, and you may formulate those questions as you hear the presentations, when you're done, raise your card and someone will come and pick it up from you. Got it? Okay. This panel discussion will be recorded, and recordings will be available on the North Seattle Progressives website soon hereafter. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Alison Eisinger, who's the Executive Director of Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness. Right here next to me. The Coalition of Homelessness is a housing and homelessness policy, education, and advocacy organization. Formed in 1979, the coalition's work is formed by a practical experience of its members, which include more than 50 organizations that provide homes, shelter, employment services, legal aid, street outreach to more King County residents. She has a master's degree in social work from the University of Washington and has spent nearly a decade working in public health in King County before becoming part of the coalition. So let's give a warm welcome to Alison.
My name is Alison Eisinger. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. Thank you to Lori, thank you to Liz, thanks to everyone who organized to put this together. I'm going to try to do this in under 10 minutes so that we maximize the time for discussion and Q&A. And And I hope that you will, bring your interest to the table that the coalition has out there, where my colleague Danielle is warmly welcoming all who are interested in being part of our work for housing justice. I do feel compelled to acknowledge the cognitive dissonance that we may be experiencing and feeling being here in the warm and dry, wonderful Shorewood High School, which I've never been to before, while there are thousands of our neighbors trying to stay warm outside, and while we know that our democracy is under assault. The way in which I try to cope with cognitive dissonance is to acknowledge it. So I want to recognize that, and also acknowledge that there are people here right now in this room who may have personal experience of homelessness. And we should always acknowledge and be humble about what those of us who are sometimes called experts do and don't know. I know certain things. So the Coalition on Homelessness, who are we? What are we? We are a fiercely independent, non-governmental advocacy organization. For 27 years, we were an all-volunteer organization, and I am bringing that up to you now to remind you that lots of great things emerge when people come together, not for pay, but to work together to get things done. The Coalition's mission is to organize our community to challenge the systems and systemic causes of homelessness, and to advocate for housing justice. We do this in a variety of ways. You are all welcome at basically everything we do. We have monthly meetings, we have case manager trainings. We are going tomorrow to Olympia for Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Day with a bus filled with people, most of whom have never been to Olympia before in their lives, who are going to speak up with hundreds of people from around the state, and in many cases meet with their state lawmakers and their legislative assistants to talk about our budget and policy priorities, and I'll get to those a little bit. Among the things we do is we help people who don't have traditional home addresses know their voting rights, register, and vote. If you're looking for a cool volunteer opportunity, we train you in nonpartisan voter registration actions, and we give you opportunities in community settings to help folks. This is a training we had just prior to COVID. We also provide backpacks, school supplies, dental kits, and culturally and age-appropriate books to over 1,800 homeless school-age kids in King County public schools every year. Another awesome volunteer opportunity, including for kids. And we show up and demonstrate. This is one of the earliest Federal Building Fridays that was organized by other activists at the Seattle Federal Building every Friday. We really respect and appreciate them for holding that regular space to stand up for what we need our federal government to do, to stand with federal workers who are also under attack, and to remind everyone that HUD's job is to house the people of this country. So you can see, we've got activism in our DNA, but here's the thing that I feel moved to share with you. This morning as I was checking Facebook, there was a guy in my neighborhood group who posted something saying he feels really terrible that he hasn't gotten involved before now, but he's ready to get involved, and what suggestions do people have? People gave all kinds of really good suggestions. A couple people were kind of unnecessarily snarky, and somebody said, hey, there's this great gathering up in Shoreline, you should go. And someone else commented and said, he's not an activist, why would he go to something called Activists Assemble? I think you all know that the answer to that is, we are all activists, and there is no time like the present. So these are some of the ways that we invite people to get involved. We're taking hundreds of postcards with us, and I want to tell you briefly about some of the priorities that we have that we're bringing forward in the state legislature. Here's a little caveat. I don't expect you to remember all this. I do ask you, if you're interested, to sign up at the Coalition's website, www.homelessinfo.org, get on our Action Alerts email list, or go out and talk with Danielle and me after this presentation, and we'll gladly sign you up. So there are several priorities. The first one is progressive revenue. This legislative session is 60 days long. We are already 10 days into it. Progressive revenue is the number 1, number 2, and number 3 issue. We have a massive multi-billion-dollar state budget deficit, and we need to ensure that we have not 1 or 2, but multiple additional sources of progressive revenue, in part to offset the horrific multi-million-dollar, $40 to $60 million cuts in King County alone that we are bracing for from the feds towards our housing, and $120 million of a possible cut to housing in the state overall. So the Well-Washington bill introduced by Representative Sean Scott is one of several bills that we are supporting. Also, some of you might be familiar with the city of Kenmore, not too far from where we are. The city of Kenmore a few years ago was the site of something that isn't specific to Kenmore alone. It happens in communities all over our state and all over our nation. There was a fully funded, shovel-ready apartment building for 100 people leaving homelessness, with city funding, county funding, state funding, federal funding, and multiple other sources of private dollars, ready to go for people leaving homelessness. And the neighbors organized and killed that project. Ew. So, House Bill 2266 would prevent that from happening. And we're going to need you to help us pass that bill and the Senate companion. I literally got a message as I was driving up here today that there are some amendments coming, so what I would ask you to remember is the state legislative process moves fast, and it requires you and me to take action multiple times on important bills. So please get on our list, and we will send you information about when and how to take action on this very important bill to prevent discrimination in the siting of housing, shelter, and services. The third bill, you might have heard of another lovely jurisdiction in our region, Burien. Burien, as you may know, passed one of the most harsh banishment ordinances anywhere in the state, and essentially said it is illegal to be homeless, even if you're from Burien, anywhere in Burien. Together with 3 people experiencing homelessness, the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness filed a lawsuit thanks to the Northwest Justice Project, and we are currently suing the city of Burien over that ordinance. However, thank you. However, I have to tell you 2 really important, relevant things. One is that we've already been suing them for 2 years and the ordinance is still on the books. And 2 is that one of our 3 co-plaintiffs has already passed away prematurely from what she experienced while homeless. So we need to ban these bans. And we need to say that it is cruel punishment to pass such laws, and that we are not going to allow jurisdictions in our state to pass them. So that's House Bill 2489, Shelter Not Penalties. As an advocate, I think it's really important to be honest. That bill is not going to pass this year. But we have gotten over 1,000 people signed in on it already, and we want you to help us keep that pressure up, because good laws sometimes take years to get through the legislature, and we're not giving up. Having a plan about how to move forward with legal advocacy, with in-person advocacy with your elected representatives, is the way that we make progress. So, in conclusion, thank you, Timekeeper, you're wonderful. Here are our QR codes. Personally, I'm not a QR code kind of person, so again, grab me afterwards, find Danielle. We have, if you go out here to the left, we have a table with a blue tablecloth. We would love to talk with you and engage and involve you and hear from you what's going on in your communities. Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to be in the work with you all.
Thank you, Alison. Wow. Your group does an awful lot of work, and I was mainly really taken back by how many supplies you're able to provide for children, homeless children, 1,800 of them, as well as your charge on progressive revenue. I think everybody can relate to that and wants to see something happen. And everyone, I'm going to reiterate House Bill 2266. Look it up, take some action, make some comments. Thank you. Next up, we have Kerry O'Meara, which Kerry is from North Helpline, and they also are tabling with us today. North Helpline is a food bank and a community resource hub located in the Lake City and Bitter Lake neighborhoods. Kerry works at North Helpline as a community connector, providing direct connections for their food bank guests and community resources and connecting them. She also administers North Helpline's eviction and utility shutoff prevention program and has a broad knowledge of current housing resources and disparities in King County. Kerry, if you would like to come forward, thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Alison. I get Alison's newsletter, the coalition's newsletter is always impressive how much they do. Someone once told me that advocacy work and direct service on the ground, they're like 2 feet, right? They have to go together in order to move forward. So I am so appreciative of what the coalition is doing, addressing the housing crisis and also the homelessness crisis. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about North Helpline. North Helpline, we are engaged more in the direct service area, addressing the needs. It's been around since 1989. Let's see. It started out as a volunteer group, just few volunteers in the North Seattle area providing eviction prevention, some food. It started out as a food pantry, but it grew and grew because the need grew. So now it's becoming a much bigger operation. We have 2 locations, one in Lake City and one in the Bitter Lake area. Majority, we are a food bank, but on the side, our goal, our motto is always a roof over our head and food on the table. This is what we're trying to provide for our community. So besides food, we also have a homelessness prevention program that provides direct monetary assistance to those who are facing eviction. And also for those, our neighbors living on the street, we try to provide little things like hygiene supplies and no-cook meals, ready-to-eat food that they don't need to cook, that doesn't require cooking. Just sometimes if we get warm winter clothes, just little things to triage and just provide a little bit comfort to those who are in grave needs. The food bank, the food services also includes a home delivery service for those who are not able to leave their home to get food. I think currently we have over 200 families that we deliver to on a weekly basis. And part of we understand that we cannot do it alone. It takes a village. So part of our goal is also to co-locate as much as we can with other community service partners. We know that it's a challenge if you have to come to us and then drive another 10 miles to find another service or call some. So we try as much as we can to co-locate with other providers. So we are in the exact same building as the Seattle Indian Health Board. So people come to get food from us, get community resource. They can also see a doctor right at the same spot. We are also on the same street, a block away from Lake City Partners GLA Day Center that provides meal, laundry, and shower service for those who are in housing. We also try to connect with community partners to have them come provide direct service as much as we can on site, just to eliminate barriers. So I'm going to try to shave off as much time as we can so to provide more time for questions. And like Alison said, I'm also around afterwards. I'm tabling out there. Feel free to come grab me if you have any questions or about North Helpline. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. It's really informative to be able to connect advocacy and then the boots on the ground and our direct service providers. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing here in the North End. Valerie Sassoon is in the audience, and she is a council member for the city of Kenmore. And Alison was talking about a project that had been axed. So if you have any questions, I'm going to raise your hand again. Feel free to talk with Valerie. Let's hear from our third presenter today, Jeff Paul. House Your Neighbors, or HON, H-O-N, is a political advocacy organization that fights for social housing, connecting communities and climate action. Jeff has been with HON since the beginning in 2021, and we went through this and edited, edited his bio, and I can't follow it. But it does say over here, recently became co-executive director. So I think that's the most important thing we want to know right now. And I know personally I look forward to hear more about social housing. Thank you.
Hey, how's everybody doing out there? All right. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jeff Paul. I am as of a week ago, the co-executive director of House Our Neighbors. House Our Neighbors has been around since 2021. We initially came together. Oh wait, I'm gonna go ahead and start my slides here, I suppose. So this is us. So here's a bit about us. So House Our Neighbors, we came together as a coalition of housing and homelessness advocates in 2021 to fight an anti-homeless charter amendment that was introduced in Seattle. It was called Compassion Seattle. It was a misnomer. Charter Amendment 29. We fought that. We partnered up with the ACLU of Seattle, and we successfully got it kicked off of the ballot, which was a huge victory. But yeah, pretty cool. We love the ACLU. We then came back together and we were like, we want to fight for something positive. We see so I come from a background in education, so I'm going to ask you all to raise your hands a lot as I give this presentation. Who here thinks that we have a functioning housing system in the United States? Raise your hands. Don't be shy. Right. No, yeah. We have, Han started from this position, we have a fundamentally broken housing system in the United States. And what could we do as this coalition to fight for something positive that we wanted to see? There are amazing organizations that we've heard from and countless others that are doing incredible work. But we're fighting an uphill battle in a system that fundamentally is not doing what it needs to do, which is house the majority of our people in places that they can afford. Where they can have a dignified and comfortable life. Lots of people are living on the streets, but people are also incredibly rent burdened. People are paying 60% of their income in rent to live in Seattle. Seniors can't find places where they can live on fixed income. And we have a fundamental issue of providing decent housing for people in this country. And so that is what we wanted to address. But we also knew that we have this problem, which is that sometimes our politicians don't do everything that we need them to do. And so we decided that we were going to come together and we were going to run an initiative for something that we believed in, which was social housing. Who here has heard of social housing? Oh, okay, all right. Who wants to give me a definition? Okay. Social housing, I'll get into a bit more, but it is permanently affordable, publicly owned housing that is available universally to anybody, so people of mixed income backgrounds. And this is a model that has been implemented successfully around the world. We learned about it and we were like, this is a missing piece of our housing strategy, and we're going to fight for it. So we came together and formed a massive coalition, built a huge amount of support to pass an initiative in 2023, initiative I-135, that passed by about 16%. That created a social housing developer in Seattle. So it's a public development authority, kind of like Pike Place Market or like our stadiums. And its job is to buy and build permanently affordable mixed income social housing throughout Seattle. And unfortunately, though, you need money to build housing, as Alison was talking about. We then said, all right, well, we're going to do this ourselves again. We're not going to trust that the government is going to do everything that we need them to do. And so we ran a second initiative, Initiative 137, that became Proposition 1A, and that was to tax the ultra-rich to pay for dignified housing for the people of Seattle. How do we feel about that? Yeah. Taxing the rich, we like, yeah? And that passed by overwhelming majority just this past February. In 2025, by about 64% of voters in Seattle voted in favor of it, even though the Chamber of Commerce, Amazon, Microsoft spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting it and attacking us. Our previous mayor was on their side supporting it. Look what that did for him. We still won by an overwhelming margin, and the people of Seattle have demonstrated that we desperately want social housing because people deserve to have a dignified place to live in this city where they work. And so that's what we've been up to, and we're going to move forward. I want to do I know we have limited time, we'll get into some questions, but I'm going to do a brief overview of housing as it exists. Actually, I don't think I have time for this slide. But this is basically looking at our existing housing sectors. There's really good stuff happening in our existing housing sectors. There's all sorts of people, public housing that we think of that's like HUD housing, trying to do good stuff, but they're limited. Nonprofit affordable housing, really, really important. The majority of our affordable housing right now, limited in what they can do, unable to address certain things. And then, of course, private housing, really limited in lots of ways. So we saw social housing as a way to step in and fill a crucially needed gap. And I'm going to define the big things for social housing really quick, and then I'll talk about what we're up to next. So number one, social housing is publicly owned in perpetuity. So this is public housing, and it remains in public hands for forever. So we're removing housing from the private speculative market. So publicly financed and controlled, and there's no profit motive. This is very important. Number two, permanently affordable. Rents are capped usually at 20 to 30% of a resident's income. So rents are based on people's income. This is very important. You will not move into social housing and become rent burdened. Whatever your income is, if it goes up and it goes down, your rent will be 30% of what you're paying at most, which we feel is really important to give people stability. But crucially, and you'll see in this next one, this is available to all people. It's available to nearly all incomes, which creates these what we call cross-class communities. So you have people who are struggling, who are low income, but you also have people who are middle income, teachers, nurses, custodial staff, baristas, the people who make our cities run, also living in these buildings. And crucially, there's no benefits cliff in social housing. This is a big problem. I used to live in low income housing a couple years ago. I made just about the maximum amount you can make to not lose your housing. So if I had taken a full-time job, because I was working a part-time job, I would have lost my housing. And it's important that we have housing that's set aside for low-income folks, but that also creates this problem where it's hard for people to take on new opportunities and improve their living conditions. Social housing wanted to fix that, so we have universal public housing that you can live in and improve your conditions as you live in it. And your rent will go up as you make more money, but you'll be able to grow in place, which we think is really important. And that creates these beautiful mixed income communities that also allows for cross-subsidization. So that's a big fancy word. That basically means we're helping to pay for this housing by having folks who make a little bit more pay a little bit more in rent so they can subsidize the people who make a little bit less, which we think is basically the financial model that makes social housing successful. And this really gets into how it's paid for. I'll send these slides out after if folks want them, take a picture. Basically, we get money from taxing the super rich. We build housing, we move people in, people pay rent. That rent is used to subsidize the lower income folks who move in, and we're able to bond and take on loans to build more housing. So social housing is really set up well to be able to expand very quickly, which is why we think it's really, really important to fund it and make it successful. As I said earlier, social housing is an internationally proven model, so it's all over the place. Most notably, social housing has been around for 100 years in Vienna, in Austria. In Vienna, about 50% of the residents live in social housing, and on average pay about 28% of their income on rent. So half of the city is renting in social housing. The social housing developer in Vienna is the largest landlord in Europe, and provides for lots of people's needs. It's very normal to live in public social housing in Vienna. And people love it. It is universally loved across the entire political spectrum. Even the far right, they just are racist and want it to only be for Europeans, people of European descent, but they still like social housing, which is, whatever. But you can see this is like everywhere you go. This is a successful model. Helsinki, Singapore, in Seoul, so this is not a new thing. It's just hasn't been implemented very much in the United States, but we're changing that. So social housing is growing in popularity in the U.S., and we are a big part of that happening. You can see places where it has been created and places where legislation is being introduced. And because I only have 30 seconds left, I'm going to talk about what we're doing right now. We're also involved in the state legislature. We have two bills, House Bill 1687 and Senate Bill 6201, that we are supporting. Please get involved at this link. If you scan that QR code, I will email you and I can tell you how to get involved more. We're going to be doing a lot of land use advocacy work in Seattle's comprehensive plan, which has taken 5 years. We're going to be working on tenant governance in social housing. A really cool part about social housing is that it's run by the tenants who live in it. The board is majority elected by the tenants of social housing, and we're figuring out that process to make sure that tenants have a real say over how their buildings are run, which we think is really important. And then also, we're trying to expand social housing. It shouldn't just be in Seattle. Maybe it could come to Shoreline. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, get involved, stay in the loop. If you scan this, you'll get on our email list. We'd love to connect. Those are also our socials if you're on the socials. And yeah, like they said, come and find me afterwards. Thank you.
Wow. That is pretty exciting stuff there, Mr. Paul. I'm really pleased to see that Seattle moved to pass 1A, Prop 1A with 64%. That's pretty darn incredible. And the fact that the model shows something about prorated rent, and if you can afford more, you pay more, and you subsidize those that aren't able to. And that way we're able to find equity and reduce disparities. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, as I'm sure everyone else did. Okay, question and answers. Now, we've got some questions coming in, which is fabulous, and we're going to open up the mic so that you each can respond to the question if you so choose. The first one is, we've established that our community needs more affordable housing. Duh. And what is the biggest barriers we face to achieve that? Anyone want to talk about what are our biggest barriers that we face to achieving progress in affordable housing? Not a small question.
I think we probably have plenty of things to talk about. I'll just mention two pieces. One is worth naming, and that is political will. But political will is not a thing that's over there somewhere. Political will is generated by public will, and that's what everybody here today is engaged in. It is worth saying because sometimes we do frame this, and I'm really interested to have this conversation with Jeff about as government not doing what we need government to do. And of course, we're living in a time when we are seeing government actually attack the people and institutions of this country. But in fact, participatory democracy is about government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So in a way, we're just, I guess you could say, traditionalists, thinking about getting government to respond to the need for homes that people can afford. I I hesitate to say something that can really sound depressing, but I do believe it's necessary to be honest and realistic about where we are. We are not going to solve the crisis of homelessness in the next 4 years. We are not going to solve the crisis of affordable housing in the next 4 years. These are crises that have been created over decades. What we are living through right now are the most extreme policy shifts, and those are terrible, but they are not the only reasons that we are going to struggle for years to do this. So it's good for us to remember these are long-term policy efforts. I happen to be the daughter of someone who was born and raised in Vienna, and Vienna has been known throughout not only Austria but Europe as a place where actual democratic socialism has been implemented, with the exception of the Nazi era, for much of the 100 years. So we have a lot to learn, but we also have to find our own way here in this country, in this century, in this moment.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to briefly address this? Because we now have a stack of questions. Your audience really wants to talk to you. So,
I just want to briefly touch on affordable housing, because when you walk around our neighborhood these days, it seems like affordable housing popping up everywhere. There's like, if you go to Northgate, if you go to Lake City, there seems to be lots of apartments advertising that are affordable, but I just want to address that from my observation. Those are false advertisements, like what Jeff was saying. Those are what the tax credit apartments, those are not solving our problems. Those are apartments in Seattle, in King County, so expensive. You might rent a one-bedroom for $1,800. What they call affordable is knocking $200 off that, and that is not affordable. And there's a very strict income to rent ratio. You have to make, renting a $1,600 apartment, you have to make at least $3,500. And there's a very, very sliver of people that can qualify for that, and that is still at least half of your income. So the real solution is what Alison and Jeff said, is these, the ones that are no more than 30% of the income. And I'm so excited to hear more about social housing, because traditionally what I know is the HUD housing, but they're so limited, and they, but what, like Alison said, these housing needs to come from the top, from the government political will, but it is fueled by public will to move it forward.
Jeff, there's a question that's directed directly to you, so maybe you can incorporate your answer, two answers in one, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Someone really wants to know, when can we expect to see the first sound housing project open in Seattle?
Within a couple months, so pretty exciting. Yeah, so yeah, pretty cool. I don't want to overpromise and promise an exact timeline, but I would say if there will be an so social housing is going to be doing a lot of acquiring existing buildings currently and turning those into public assets, because there's a lot of like very unaffordable places, but there's also this like crisis that we are in a crisis of affordable housing right now. So while we do have new things coming up, affordable housing providers are struggling deeply, and that there's a variety of reasons why that's happening. Part of it is that like COVID funding has fallen off. Part of that is that expenses have risen dramatically. Part of it is anyway, there's lots of reasons, and affordable housing providers are looking at selling off their buildings and turning affordable housing, which has been heavily subsidized by the taxpayer, into private assets for landlords to make a bunch of money off of, which we think is horrific. And so a likely scenario will be that social housing developer will be buying some of those buildings to create those as public assets in perpetuity, to ensure that some of that money that has gone to supporting those buildings becoming affordable housing units like stays within the kind of public hands. So because we're going to be acquiring, and because we have about $60 million coming into the social housing developer every single year because of this tax, we are able to hopefully move fairly quickly to do that. We're in a bit of a buyer's market right now for buildings. So there's actually lots of people who are interested in working with us. I say us, House Our Neighbors is not the social housing developer. Very important difference. But the social housing developer is looking to acquire. There will definitely be social housing in 2026, hopefully many buildings. So that's what I can say about that. But in terms of what's in our way, I'll be super quick. Everything that the two of you have said, political will, I think one of the most important things is that the federal government has completely abandoned its responsibility for the past since before I was alive. Under Reagan, we massively cut HUD funding and has never recovered. Public housing has been the backbone of providing housing to Americans who are struggling, because there will always be Americans struggling in this capitalist system. We'll always have people who are not making enough to afford to live in market rate units, and the government has known throughout much of its history that it needs to step in and support those people, but it has abandoned those people for decades. And we're now in a period where we have to readjust, and as Alison said, that's going to take a lot of time, but building that political will to fight for that is so important. And it's really important that we address the stigma around public housing. Public housing is good. Really important that we have strong and robust public housing. It's a crime that in 1992, the federal government decided it was going to cap the amount of public housing that we can have in any area. Seattle cannot have more HUD-owned public housing than it had in, I think, 1992. I might be getting that year wrong. But the federal government prohibits us from having more housing stock than we did in the 90s. So even if we had all this money come through, right now, we can't increase that amount because of the Fair Cloth Amendment. It's so stupid. So there's a lot of political will, a lot of changes that need to happen. That's a huge part of it. The thing that I'll mention, and then I'll wrap up so we can go to the next one, is our land use codes. We are not allowed to build affordable housing in most of our cities, and that has to change. And I can speak more to that, but I'll move on for now.
Okay. This is a question that's going to tap your creativity. And this is coming from, I'm going to read it, it's directly from one of our participants. I'm part of an org that helps trans people flee red states. We are called KOI. Tons of trans people are fleeing to Washington, and many in their vulnerable states become homeless. We fundamentally need housing for these people, and with your experience, how should we address this crisis beyond housing people on our couches?
First of all, thanks for being part of organizing that network. I know that our state and several other states are places that people have decided that they will be safer, or their family members will be safer. People come to this region for all kinds of reasons. We have a huge population growth in this region. Housing prices are high and continue to rise. There is no magic answer. I'm sure the person who's asking this question is probably familiar with the Black Trans Task Force Lavender Rights Project, which actually does now operate an apartment building. But you can reach out to them. I'm actually in touch with somebody else at another organization in Seattle that's part of maybe the same, but with a different name, network. And I think, the answer is be in dialogue with folks about what you can leverage, generate, make happen. But remember, we actually are all in this together. So all of the issues around what it takes to build, operate, and provide services in housing are true no matter who it is who's being housed or who needs that housing. We have a lot of people who are about to lose their homes, people who are in mixed status households, who are in federally funded public housing. We're not in a position to say there is a perfect response to people who are coming here fleeing oppression based on being trans. we can just say, welcome to the fight.
I'd like to maybe give an example of some other advocacy that has happened around securing housing for folks who have come to Washington due to political persecution, which is housing and shelter support that was fought for asylum seekers and migrants a few years ago in Tukwila and Kent and some other places down in South King County. There's a huge influx of migrants and asylum seekers. Was this 2023, Alison? And a lot of effort made to find places for those folks to live. These were families with children, lots of folks who were struggling, people who didn't speak English, who were just looking for some temporary housing so they could find some working permits to be able to get a job and stand on their own 2 feet and contribute to our country. This was increasingly challenging to do. At a certain point, about 500 people were living in this tiny house village that was on a church parking lot, I think down in Tukwila. And this was an untenable situation. And it provoked a lot of really, really good organizing work. So those folks started setting up small encampments in different parts of the city, and then going to the city hall, going to the county and saying, hey, we need your help. We need housing so that we can get on our feet. It's impossible to go through this work permit application process with 4 kids for a single mom who doesn't have a place to live. And this ended up culminating in an Occupy protest at an empty motel in Kent. It was an Econo Lodge that the King County had purchased in 2020 as a shelter during the pandemic. But the city of Kent, shout out to the bill that Alison mentioned, really please support that, put a restraining order against the King County to not be able to use that as a shelter during the pandemic. Which was terrible, and so it's sat empty ever since. King County owns this motel that they could put hundreds of people in, but Kent has blocked them from doing so. They set up an occupation protest on the lawn outside of it, demanding to go in. They never got inside, but that was a months-long occupation protest that ended up resulting in a one-time pool of funds, $27 million from the state, to give those people access to housing vouchers and support. So, as Alison said, welcome to the fight, but I think this kind of organizing is how we actually apply the political pressure to our legislators to make things happen. That was, a lot of people came together to make that happen and secured real housing stability for hundreds of families through that effort. And I think it was really cool, and I think it's something that we should consider replicating as things get more and more difficult for us.
And someone is asking about vacancy tax, which really dovetails with what you were just talking about, Jeff. In that buildings that are not being used and left empty, what is the likelihood of being able to tax the owners of those buildings for not actually utilizing them?
I mean, I think there was an attempt by then Seattle City Council member Lisa Herbold to impose a particular form of vacancy tax on people who owned not necessarily vacant buildings, but vacant apartments. And this was modeled after some efforts in Vancouver, British Columbia, where there's been an awful lot of investing in high-end apartments and condos as basically, using housing as an investment rather than as a basic need. And at the time, interestingly, there was a huge backlash, and it was she was accused of being racist, since so many of the overseas investors were from the wealthiest 1% of various Asian nations. And I think there is some interest in it. It's something that sounds really simple and is not actually that simple. So that's about as much as I am able to speak to that. These are all ideas that are worth exploring, and it's always worth recognizing that it may not be quite so simple as we might like it to be.
Sure is creative, though. I think, like the earlier question, at this point, it takes creativity.
Yes.
And the first thing is find out really how many vacant properties do we have in this area compared? I do know in British Columbia and Vancouver there is a much higher, much higher proportion, but to find out how many, to my general knowledge, is not as much as Vancouver, but it will be interesting to know how many properties sits empty and then to move forward. But I think it is a creative solution, and for short-term wise, we do need to come up with creative, think outside the box to come up with anything to triage the current crisis.
The answer is approximately 15 million across the United States.
Those are heavily concentrated in different areas. What was that?
Alaska, Maine.
Yeah, yeah, Detroit. Yeah, vacation homes. Yeah. Seattle has a relatively low compared to the national average number. I think we hover somewhere around 4%, and a lot of that ends up being like turnover. You know, there's always going to be some amount of vacancy because like people are moving in and out of buildings or something gets remodeled. But it is something that we should do. I know that Councilmember Eddie Lynn is interested in it. He talked about it on his campaign trail, and he worked for the Office of Housing. So I think that there is like exploration of it happening. And also potentially in part to like pay for some housing programs in the short term as we look at budget issues. So I think it'll be something that's considered, but I think that as you mentioned, I don't think our vacancy rate in Seattle in particular is as high as in other places. We have a supply issue in Seattle, which is that there is not enough housing supply. It's not necessarily that our supply is being horribly misused, though some of it. Mostly we need to build new housing. We don't have the same vacancy issues that other places do.
But the point that the person who just shared this piece of information mentioned that not everybody might have heard is, I believe that you pointed out a lot of this is vacation homes or second homes, and there is a rather neat solution there, which is to eliminate the mortgage interest tax deduction for second homes and third homes and fourth homes and fifth homes. That, of course, would need to happen on the national level, but it is clearly a way to say, great, we live in a capitalist society, you have enough money to buy a second or a third or a fourth home, go ahead and do it, pay your fair share so that other people can have one home.
Alison, do you remember, there's another bill that is talking about shifting, it's being called like the Beautiful Cities Act or something like that. It's a bill that's about like changing property taxes, like allowing cities to like opt into like a land value tax sort of system.
I'm not familiar with that.
I don't remember. I don't know it super well either. But one issue we do have is there a lot of like single-family homes that have been bought with the intention to demolish them and build a building, but now developers sit on them for a very long time. So there's a lot of like vacant single-family homes throughout Seattle, just kind of sitting there waiting for the right conditions to develop. And my understanding is that there's a bill in the legislature right now. I wish I had more information for you, but the goal is to allow cities to change the way that they collect property taxes. That would basically, right now our property taxes are based both on the land value and on the value of the building. And if you have one of those derelict homes, the value of the building's pretty low, so the property taxes are fairly low, and so developers can just sit, and they're actually making more money by the value of the land going up over time. But if you shift a greater burden of that to the value of the land, then there's a bigger squeeze on those folks who are just sitting. Like the house right next to mine has been abandoned for like 10 years. Developers just holding on to it, waiting for the right market conditions to build a building there. And so if we shifted a greater property tax burden onto them because of the land value, then they would be incentivized to build sooner. So I know that's something that's happening in the state legislature. I don't have enough information about it to share more than that, though.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We have about 5 minutes left, so I've got a question that, again, addresses direct service. So this is to you, Kerry. And then we'll have a fast round of one question that I'd like you each to think about a 2-sentence answer for, okay? So this one's coming from our audience. And what is the most effective way or a good contact for healthcare workers to be able to mobilize as a group to advocate for emergency shelter?
To mobilize a group, well, that goes back to the advocacy work, right? Contact Alison.
Yeah.
As a group, I've seen so many. Yes, it is people who are in need of surgery, who just come out of surgery, who come out of their they're sent out on the street, and it is heartbreaking. And I'm sure if the medical community comes together, anytime when voices are heard, when there's people coming together, if the medical community comes together as a whole to advocate, I'm sure that will generate some, a little bit more acknowledgement than individual voices alone.
Go ahead, Alison.
contact@homelessinfo.org. Please email us because we love to get healthcare professionals involved. Your voices are powerful. And I will just say, we have used groups of healthcare professionals to great effect in a number of ways, including showing up wearing stethoscopes and white coats to City Hall, but also talking to your neighbors about how important it is to welcome housing and shelter into your neighborhoods. And your voices are really powerful in your own community networks as well as in public spaces. So again, that email is contact@homelessinfo.org. And let's just remember that Alex Preti was an ICU nurse at his local VA.
Okay. All right, ready for the rapid question response here? As an average person, what can we do to help? What's the highest priority you could put on that question for people to be able to start their activism? What would you like to see happen?
I would go like earlier I said, direct service and advocacy goes hand in hand. So it is where your passion leads you to advocate, to prepare shelter meal, to pack hygiene bags, to talk to your legislators. So it's where anything helps. So start today.
My 2-sentence answer is going to be join an organization and get involved. But whatever organization that is doing the work that you care about, join it, get plugged in with the work they're doing, and get involved. You'll be so much more successful in an organization that's doing the kind of work that you want to do.
I like to say, when people go to their healthcare provider and say, what sort of exercise should I be doing to stay in shape? The answer from a good healthcare provider is always going to be the kind that you will do and keep doing. The great Nancy Amadei, a wonderful activist, advocate, teacher who passed away earlier this year, and a real friend of mine, had the best definition of advocacy that I've ever heard, which is that advocacy just means speaking up. You're here. You've got the ingredients. Keep doing it, and remember that part of the role is to help other people do the same. And you will learn by helping other people what it takes for a kid or a person with a disability or a person who's living in their vehicle or your book group to speak up. It is incumbent on all of us. I think we all can understand that.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to thank you very much, all three of you. So if we can give a round for Alison and Jeff and Kerry. North Helpline is tabling out here, so if you want to give some direct contact, have direct contact with them and figure out how you can best support them right away, they're here, along with Alison's organization, Seattle and King County Coalition and Homelessness, also has a table out here. So I welcome you to go and explore